clarification?
Yeah.
Like, so
Recording in progress.
I'm hereby calling the meeting to order. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. Thank you for being here. I'd like to acknowledge that we occupy the unceded lands of the Coast Miwok peoples and thank them for their stewardship and recognize our responsibility to continue that tradition and improve upon past practices of our those who have taken the lands. Let's see, and now I need two screens at once. So, this is still on, stays on, right? So you're all hearing me yammer, perfect. Okay, we will start with a roll call. So Denise, over to you.
Baker,
Present.
Bartholomew, Edminster,
Here.
Ganty,
Here.
Oret,
Here.
Peters,
Here.
Fong,
Here.
Hudson, Shribs,
Okay, thank you very much. Now we move on to general public comment. And I see we have a comment from Taryn Obaid, who is present in the room.
Thank you. Up at East Washington Fields, total plan, 6 fields going in. I emailed you all this today with pictures. 3 have gone in, soccer fields. 3 baseball fields are planned to go in. This plan was from 2007, light years ago. The plan is for PFAS, forever chemical plastic grass turf. 3 of the fields up there are filled with crumb rubber, which is ground up old rubber tires. It's carcinogenic. Go up there. I was up there. I sent you pictures. It's going into the storm drains. There's a series of about 12 storm drains that line the fields that then drain 10 feet back into the creek. Rubber's going into the creek, grass blades with forever chemicals going into the creek. Can we please take some bold action, write a letter to the city council urging them to pause this plan and reevaluate natural turf? We've got purple pipe up there, and over the life cycle of synthetic turf, it's much more expensive than natural grass in terms of total costs, environment costs, injury costs, etc. So also Lucchese's got an 8-year-old synthetic turf. It's dead now because they don't last forever, and we know it's not recyclable. It gets shipped to Texas, then up to the Northeast, and then there's one facility, I believe, 1, maybe 2 in the entire United States that will try to recycle synthetic turf. That's for the few that make it there. It's such a bad idea. 2007, it sounded like a good idea perhaps, but we're not in 2007 anymore, and I don't think we should be rolling forward with this plan. And I would really like to ask you to consider every option for action that you can take. Climate Action Commission, to tell the city council to please not do this, because there's lots of lawsuits. You read it in the paper every day. It's contaminating water wells. In Orange County, they closed down, I think, 70 water wells due to forever chemical contamination. We rely on our groundwater here. Agricultural business does. People that live here do. We don't need to subject our children to playing on carcinogenic fields, or all of us drinking and consuming these forever chemicals, which are toxic. Endocrine system, immune system, cancer. So there's my pitch. Please look in your inbox. You should be forwarded the email with the photos. Please go visit the East Washington fields. I met young women up there. They say they want natural. A lot of places do natural right. Universities got it all locked in. They do not like the synthetic. It gets 160 degrees up there, even on a 80-degree day. It's
Thanks, Taryn. Does not appear that we have anyone else from the public who wishes to speak. And Taryn, I think you're probably aware that as this is not an agendized item, we cannot actually discuss it, but we can certainly consider discussing it at our upcoming meeting. And certainly I would encourage all commissioners to share their views individually with the council on this in the shorter term. So thank you so much for speaking about this. Okay, our next item is approval of minutes. And Denise, I had actually sent a correction to Shelley. I don't know if did you get her email or? Okay, so that'll make its way to her. But for the rest of you, I mentioned at the last meeting that we had an item sent to us by Veronica Olson regarding some opportunities for climate-based trainings offered by ICLEI. The acronym is ICLEI, and that was, Shelley did her best to capture that, but it wasn't quite correct. So I've sent her that, and I'm sure she'll capture it in the final version of the minutes. Any other corrections to minutes, commissioners, or shall we consider that a wrap? Okay, all right, thank you. Moving on to, I have to keep waking my phone up to show me the agenda. Be so handy if this screen in front of me showed me the agenda. Okay, so we have public hearings and matters for consideration. Item 3, Climate Action Commission orientation and training. This item is not a project pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15378B5. And Eric, I believe this one is over to you and represents the majority of our agenda this evening. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chair Edminster, and good evening, Climate Action Commissioners. My name is Eric Danley, and I'm the city's attorney, and it's my pleasure to be here with you tonight to talk about our open meeting and open records obligations, a little bit about conflicts, and also I'm going to touch on your enabling legislation and duties, and Rihanna's asked me to be ready to address or help discuss with you questions that may exist about agenda and meeting management and that sort of thing. We have some pretty extensive set of slides here that, but the type is big, so that helps. Helps me read it too. My colleague Dylan Brady has prepared and that we've presented to other of the council's commissions and committees in similar sessions. And what I plan to do is go through them, spend some more time on some of the slides than others, and I hope you'll feel free to interrupt with questions or examples, because I'd like to make this relevant for you and helpful instead of just droning on, which I'm capable of doing, but why would you want to suffer through that? So that's the plan, I think. Have I left out anything, Rihanna? Okay, good. So we'll get started. So I guess slide 1 shows Ralph M. Brown, after whom the Brown Act is named. The next slide is the basic requirement of the Act, which is that all meetings of legislative bodies of local agencies subject to the Act. It doesn't say that, but it doesn't apply to all. There's different laws that apply to some of the state bodies, are to be open and public, and all persons are to be permitted to attend meetings of the legislative body. And these are all from the government code. And it looks like we don't have citations on your slide, but we have them if you like them, and we can provide you the slides as a reference if you'd like. We can easily do that and are happy to do it. Next
Eric,
slide.
I have a question
Sure.
already.
Good.
And
Good. We're starting out right.
Okay, yeah, I don't mean to be pedantic, but I'm just curious, a legislative body, obviously, we don't enact legislation, so I'm wondering if you could explain sort of what are the boundaries around
It's a
a
term of
legislative
art in the
body?
Brown Act, and basically it means a Brown Act body. So it's a little circular, but it means a body subject to the Brown Act. And implicitly, it presumes that you have that authority, but it doesn't need to be the case. So I mean, another way of saying that sort of as an example is, the only other subordinate bodies created by the city council that have approval authority in any respect are the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Committee. And they too are mostly advisory or frequently advisory, and all the others are purely advisory, yet they're still quote-unquote legislative bodies under the Brown Act. So, doesn't mean what you'd think it means, is I guess the short answer. Next slide, please. And why don't you bring them all up? There you go, thanks. So, that's what we're going to talk about. The Brown Act is a sort of a definitionally structured statute. So there are these pretty lengthy and sometimes counterintuitive, like we just saw, definitions that drive the coverage and some of the obligations. And so we'll track to that structure because understanding it, getting a working understanding of it requires having a working understanding of the definition. So we're going to talk about what are meetings under the Brown Act that are covered by the Brown Act. We talked about legislative bodies. That's an important definition because that affects what entities are covered. The rules that apply to meetings, agenda requirements, and we'll talk briefly about violations and remedies for violations. So who is subject, or what entities are subject? If we could go forward. Thank you. It's legislative bodies. It includes the city council, boards and commissions, standing committees of the boards and commissions, not ad hoc committees, but standing committees, as we'll talk about, and as I think you're familiar with. The exception for ad hoc committees that are not covered, not legislative bodies, are temporary advisory committees or subcommittees of less than a quorum of the legislative body. And this is key, and we didn't list it in the slide here, and they're made up exclusively of the legislative body. So one of the things we had to grapple with your committee was the fact that if there were mixed committees that consisted of other than you all, then we wouldn't satisfy the ad hoc committee. We'd have to, or ad hoc exception, we'd have to notice those. So that's why what we set up instead was to have ad hoc subcommittees of the CAC, comprised solely of less than a majority of the CAC, to which meetings you could invite members of the public if you wanted, without having them be actual members of the subcommittee, and that allowed you to have those kind of interactions without having to satisfy the requirements that we have to for this meeting in terms of noticing, et cetera. And the other subordinate bodies have to deal with and navigate the same thing because the rules that apply are the same. A group of citizens that aren't. Sure.
The invitation of the public to the ad hoc meetings.
Uh-huh.
So we haven't done that.
Uh-huh.
We wanted to do that. Could we do that through a request, or how would that practically work actually?
So you would just coordinate, connect with the chair, who would connect with staff, and, as to what the objective of that was. One of the things I should say too is we're in a challenging, just practically speaking, we're in a challenging time now, sort of resetting the committees and commissions post-COVID, coming back in person because we're not yet equipped to do all the difficult things we have to for hybrid meetings with so many bodies. The only body we're doing that with is the council right now. And so we're trying to do some standardization before we innovate again to get everybody sort of, all those bodies back meeting again live, back on track. And the reason for that, as you may know, is that the governor's emergency declaration has expired, and with it, the relaxed rules for teleconferencing have expired. So now, when we have legislative body members participating remotely, we have to notice that their remote participation and permit members of the public to participate from their remote location, just like we used to. So, that's an issue. Okay, so what's a meeting? And we do have that citation for you. It's a majority of the legislative body as defined. Collectively could be in the same place and time, or it could be serially, as we'll talk about, to hear, gathering to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on an item within the body's subject matter jurisdiction. So that's a meeting covered by the Brown Act. What is not a meeting, or what are the exceptions to that definition? Individual contacts. So there's a famous case, the Fairfield case, that talks about council members' role as community leaders and points of contact for citizens with their government to give suggestions, ask information, et cetera. And the same is true for the commissions and committees. You've been appointed because of your expertise and the fact that you're viewed as leaders in the community on these issues, and those individual contacts are important. The citizenry expects it, the community expects it. That's part of your role, and so that's permitted. It's not a violation of the Brown Act. Conferences and seminars are also not a violation. Your attendance at those, even a majority of the body or the whole body, as long as they're open to the public, limited topics of general interest, and as long as you don't, among yourselves, discuss CAC business. Community meetings, the same, and the same rules.
Sorry, Eric, could you back up?
Sure.
Limited to issues of general interest. That would preclude most conferences I attend. I'm just curious about what that's supposed to mean.
Well, I don't think it means much, to be honest. And I recognize that some of the subject matter you all engage in, lay people would consider to be highly specialized.
Yeah.
But it's still of general interest in the sense that it's not, I think the distinction really is, as opposed to the business that you conduct on, in terms of the actual items of the CIC that come before you. So the conferences that you would attend, no matter what really the range of the subject matter is on like climate change and the other issues that are related to that, are going to qualify as long as they're not hosted by the city but by another body, and they're open to the public, and you're not talking about CIC business amongst each other when you're at it. So, and if you have questions, for all this, I mean, a big reason why we do this, why we're doing this tonight, is to put things on your radar, not to expect you to know all these details, so that so that it'll prompt questions that you can raise with us that we'll be happy to assist with.
I have a follow-up question. So, it's following up on, sorry.
So this, were I to go to a conference and want to talk about the work of the commission as a topic, like, this is unusual, a small city having a climate action commission. This has been our experience. This was the path we followed. This is what we did. These are
Yep.
some of the issues in front of us. At what
Yep.
point would I get into trouble doing that?
At no point. So
Okay.
the thing is, the purpose of the Brown Act is to make sure that your business is done before the public, transparently. The purpose of the noticing that we do with the agendas is so the public can see what we're going to do and make a decision as to whether they want to attend and participate. That's why the noticing is important, and we're not supposed to, pivot in a meeting in a way that they haven't received notice because it bypasses their ability to choose to take part or not.
So there's sort of a distinction that isn't really made here, not discussing city business, prospective business or current, but obviously in the example Anne gave, that's in hindsight, like.
No, that's actually not the distinction. The distinction is a majority of you. That's the distinction. So individually, you can go off and talk about all the amazing things that you're doing to all kinds of bodies, and I hope you do. I think you do. That's not a problem. The problem is if a quorum of you are gathered in one place and time, or gather your thoughts in a series of communications like on the phone or emails or text or whatever, and it's about the business of the commission, then you've just had a meeting that you've denied the public notice about and an opportunity to participate in.
But I was making a different point, though, which is to say that if all of us or four of us were at a conference and discussed things that had already happened, that wouldn't be a violation, right? Because it's city business, but it's not a meeting because we're talking about stuff that's in the rearview mirror.
It doesn't, the time, what I'm trying to say is the time factor doesn't matter. It could be-
So even if it's talking about things that have happened that the public already knows about, and we're not talking about anything in
Yeah,
the
you can,
future.
I mean.
That's odd.
The other thing, well, because again, it's, I mean, you don't, there's a different set of concerns, and they're not really Brown Act concerns, they're bias concerns and due process concerns. If a decision-making body like the Planning Commission or the council, a member of that body, shares ahead of time their view of a project, like, I'm against this project and I'm not going to vote in favor of it. That's a bias problem that might lead to them being disqualified because they're not being objective and they're not going to decide on the record that's before them. And the person whose rights are implicated, like the project applicant, is not getting the neutral decision maker like they're supposed to get.
But again, that's prospective business, not retrospective business that's been concluded. Like if we talk about things that we've done, we've accomplished in the past, how,
So what I'm trying to say is that the time frame doesn't matter. For purposes of this body, for the Brown Act, the time frame doesn't really matter. You could be talking about stuff you've done. You can be talking about stuff you plan to do or want to do. And because it's not going to implicate substantive due process rights, because you don't make decisions on entitlements that raise those issues, you can still do it as long as it's part of the program. Like there could be I don't know, an example of like other bodies you connect with, but it could be that one or more of you could be asked to be on a panel and talk about the commission and what it's doing. That's not the same as having a secret conference away from the public, conducting your business out of the public's eye. So that the prospectiveness or the retrospectiveness doesn't matter. That's not the focus. The focus of the Brown Act is conducting business out of the public's eye when it's a majority of you, which basically constitutes a meeting of the body. That's the focus. That's what it prohibits.
Okay, I've
Because-
got a possible example that might
Sure,
fit.
sure.
So I know I participated in Know Before You Grow, and there might be other council members that are there also participating in the Zoom. I may not even see them in the Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
but I assume they're in the Zoom meeting, and there's four of us sitting there. And if I was to propose what my viewpoint was in that meeting, which is basically almost like a private meeting, then, and two other, I mean, I think it's, usually the marker is three, I think. But if three of us are in the same Zoom meeting and they hear my ideas and propositions and proposals during that meeting, that creates a bias outside of the public. So even saying that in front of two or three other members that from the same body might influence their future. So
Right.
that's what's not being allowed.
Right,
I
'cause-
can't influence them, even if I'm talking about past events, as long as I'm saying how I feel or what I think and do, might bias them possibly in any future thing.
Yeah,
So
so-
timing doesn't matter.
Thank you, council member. So that's an example of a council member who's a member of a decision-making body, and it's most relevant to those things like applications coming before the body. The bias issues don't arise like concerning legislative things, where he shares a view, a position on a decision of the body that he's inclined to make, and a majority of the body gets to hear what that is. It's like they had a secret meeting. They might as well have been in the proverbial smoke-filled back room doing that, whereas it would be fine if, say, how many members on this body now? Is it 9? 9. So if a quorum is 5, so for 5 of you to engage on topics that are in your subject matter jurisdiction, and I'm gonna, and this is probably a good time to, after we're done with this issue, I'll talk about your, the duties that are assigned to you under your enabling legislation, which is your subject matter jurisdiction, right? If 5 of you discuss stuff that's gonna come before you in your subject matter jurisdiction, away from the public, that's a violation. It's a secret meeting, basically, and you can do it by email and otherwise. But if you have been invited by an outside organization to talk as part of the program about what you're doing as a body, and you're not like doing the kind of deliberations that you do about, oh, geez, let's recommend this to the council, or let's recommend that to the council, or this should be an important part of the climate action plan, or this should, you know what I mean? That's the business that you do. But if you just talk about, you know, how it is you're playing a leadership role as experts in the field in this body, advising the council, getting ready to do the CAP, following from the emergency framework, as part of the organized program, publics they're invited to attend, it's fine, because it's not at least for purposes of the Brown Act, that's not viewed as a secret meeting. And it makes sense because you're not, another rule of thumb that I use is, if you've communicated amongst each other in a way that obviates the need to meet in one of these things, you've probably had an illegal meeting, right? You've probably, because you know what a majority of the others of your commissioners think on something that's going to come before you're going to be asked to recommend on. And it's that collective concurrence away from the public that's the problem. And so I'm seeing puzzled looks, and I'm sorry about that, but hopefully this will become clearer as we go through. I mean, basically the idea is to get you to play that community leadership role and kind of information interface kind of role, while making sure that your business as a committee happens in this kind of form. And just to quickly touch on your subject matter jurisdiction in, let's see, section 2.90.050 of the municipal code, from the original ordinance that established the Climate Action Commission, says you're to perform the duties designated and delegated by the city council on matters pertaining to climate action policies and their implementation within the city. Commission shall also serve as a forum for the consideration, analysis, and coordination of climate action-related policies, and shall advise the city on matters referred by city departments and other council-appointed hearing bodies. The Climate Action Commission shall engage with climate-related matters, including, but not limited to, so it's not a finite list, acting as a local focal point for community education through workshops where experts can share their expertise, which is something you've done a lot of, obviously. Understanding our impact on the environment, including carbon footprint and greenhouse gas emissions. Suggesting climate change policies to be implemented by the city staff, which you'll be engaged in the CAP and have been engaged in. Encouraging community groups to provide additional community involvement and expertise. Examining best practices from other jurisdictions and recommending implementation as appropriate. So that's your subject matter jurisdiction. That's your job, right? That's what the council has assigned you to do. So continuing with the slides, which are these exceptions to the meetings definition, and they're ways that you can gather without violating the Brown Act. It's the community meetings that are open and public, where you're not meeting amongst yourselves on commission business. Social events, the same one. Other exceptions, if we could go, there we go, thank you. Meetings of other bodies with yours. You can attend members of this commission can attend standing committees of the other city bodies, but, and this is a weird rule in the Brown Act, but it's a rule in the Brown Act, but only as observers, you can't take part.
So we can't go speak at a planning commission meeting?
No, because you can, because that's not a standing committee,
Okay.
okay? It's just this, like, I'm sorry, it's not a standing subcommittee.
Do we have any standing subcommittees right now?
Is the
You
tree
don't.
advisory one of those? Because it's not
Is what?
tree advisory, a standing
No, it's his own committee.
or an ad hoc that was within that committee.
If it's an ad hoc, it's an ad hoc, it's not standing. Standing subcommittees are ones that have continuing subject matter jurisdiction. They just haven't been formed to do a job and then disband. I'm trying to think. Some of the Cal Cities committees that I'm involved with are standing. But I don't know if we have any standing subcommittees. No, that's even more informal after last Monday. I don't know. I don't know that we have any standing subcommittees, but that's the difference between ad hocs and standing, is that they continue. So let's see, what else? I think that's enough for that one. So sort of the obverse of that, of the exceptions, meetings that would be prohibited under the Brown Act are collective briefings of a legislative body subject to the Brown Act, where there's more of a quorum and they're together with staff. And what's weird about that is we can send and do send, like I'm sure Rihanna sends to you, shotgun style, like information for future meetings and memos and stuff like that, and that's fine. Which, we can't do that live though, that collective briefing live, because I think the thought is there's almost no way that won't spill over into back and forth communication that again is like a secret meeting. But that's one of the requirements. We can't do retreats or workshops of a majority of the legislative body, like getting to know you or, having lunch together, whatever. We actually have to agendize that. Same with field trips. The legislative body, like, what was it? We had, I think maybe it was the council and the planning commission or something, at least the council, who were attending with members of the Army Corps on the river to look at sites that needed to be dredged and stuff. We actually had to agendize that and permit members of and provide so that members of the public could attend. The serial meetings I mentioned already, that's when an illegal meeting occurs by a series of communications, not all at once. By the classic one is email to Commissioner 1, who emails Commissioner 2, who emails Commissioner 3, and in this body, when you get to 5, you've got a serial meeting. And the idea, again, is that makes it possible to have this collective concurrence where you know what a majority of your colleagues on the body think, what their position on an issue is, what they're prepared to recommend, without having met in public. Social media can have the same, you can have the same thing via text and other social media forums. So this is just more elaboration on that. Another way those serial meetings can happen is if a majority of you were to share your views with Rihanna. We call that sometimes the hub and spoke kind of serial meeting, where she knows what a majority of the body thinks. Then she can sort of, like, that obviates the need from a staff level to have a meeting, because she already knows what a majority thinks about this. So, she should, whatever the follow-up is, it could conceivably, theoretically, it could happen without the public ever knowing or getting to play the observing role that they're supposed to get to play, and participatory role. Okay. This slide just talks about how it's okay for staff to do those shotgun communications I mentioned. The key is that collective concurrence concept, or members knowing the views of other members. That's the thing that the Brown Act is trying to guard against, to make sure the public gets to participate when they wish to.
Can you go back 2 slides and one more? Okay, this one in here is the Chain Hub email and social media part, because some of us may have Facebooks and the like. So if we have a Facebook and we have friends out there, and there might be friends on this panel up here who might be reading what I'm saying on my Facebook, that's I can't be doing that. Is that correct?
Well, it depends on how far it goes. Again, it's that collective concurrence thing.
Might I be biasing this group if they were on my Facebook and I put my ideas on my Facebook? If they're friends?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, so in that substantive due process context I mentioned, like whether you're gonna vote up or down on a project, you mean?
Or just my thoughts on what's coming up, or any ideas of
Well-
what needs to happen, or proposals? And if I'm putting my position out there and people are hearing
Unless
it,
it-
and they're in that social media,
Unless it gets to the minds of the other members of the body and enough to make up a quorum, it's technically not illegal. The problem can happen, like, this comes up when we like caution legislative body members against doing reply to all to emails so that they send it to all their colleagues at the same time. The problem is, I mean, without breaking the law, a minority of the body can do that. But if you're that member, you're making problems for your colleagues, because what happens is, it may be that, and especially this happens on the decision-making bodies, it's common and perfectly legal for members to consult with like one or two others. I'm really struggling with this. What are you thinking? What's guiding you? Whatever. That's okay. But if somebody has been shotgunning these reply to all emails, that may prevent you from doing that because somebody else has been sharing already, and you've just hit the fourth person. You've just made it a quorum. Do you see what I mean? So that's the problem with that. It can be in any form. It could be emails. It could be social media. The issue is getting to the point of a collective understanding of a majority of the body that's covered by the Brown Act. Okay? So, and if you've got examples that are bugging you, like, well, wait a minute, what about this? Holler at me, because that's probably the best way to get to grasp that. And the other thing is, if you've got questions, ask staff and they'll relay them to us, and we'll be happy to help with that. Okay, let's skip ahead past that one. I think we covered that. We talked about the remote meetings already. There are some emergency exceptions now, but they're pretty onerous. Like, if you're like really too sick to attend, you can participate remotely without permitting members of the public to, but you have to be on camera at all times. If anybody else is there with you, you have to say who's there. You can only do so many of those in a year, so it's not really very helpful exception, but it exists, and if you have that issue rise, you can let us know and we can coordinate. Otherwise, I mean, we have Councilmember Cater Thompson is going to be out of the country for an upcoming meeting, and we're going to have to work with the hotel, post the agenda 72 hours ahead of time. She's going to have to participate from a place from which members of the public can participate, and that'll be lawful, and that's how that works. And that's why we're not able to do it just logistically with the other committees and commissions right now. Let's go to open and public part and talk about the notice thing. And as I mentioned, what's so key about, and let's go to the next one. What's so key about the notice is it's what makes it possible for the public to participate in its government's business meetings, which is the whole purpose of the Brown Act. So that's how they can play their oversight function. So we have to provide effective notice, and the agenda has to adequately describe the business that's being considered so members of the public can decide whether or not they want to take part or not. Next slide, please. So this is a fairly recent change, and it says that documents that were provided to a majority of a Brown Act body less than 72 hours before the meeting have to be made available the same time they're made to the body, to the public at large. So that would include if one of you were to send an email to all of your colleagues, we'd have to post that at the same time we received it, so the rest of the public would see it. Next slide, please. Oops. In the title of tonight's item that Chair Edminster read, included that language that said, this orientation is not subject to a CEQA. that's a new requirement of, I think, what I and many of my colleagues think is a wrongly decided case involving the city of Thousand Oaks. The court confused CEQA law and Brown Act law and said it's an adequate notice under the Brown Act for an agency to fail to list what kind of CEQA findings it intends to make related to an action. But if we had to list all of our findings, like, it would be much longer than the 20 words that's supposed to be the adequate length of an agenda description. Like, if you think, for example, the findings we make for, for development project, for development fees. So anyway, this is good. This is going up on, review has been sought from the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get that fixed, from the California Supreme Court, I should say. So, non-agenda items, for the same reason, because the purpose of this law is to let the public participate and play its oversight function. When it chooses, we're not supposed to conduct substantive business that we haven't noticed on the agenda. It's okay to talk about future agenda items, because those they come back, they'll get to choose to participate. But if we get into a lengthy discussion, then we're conducting business, and the public may be missing out when they wouldn't have wished to. So types of meetings,
Can
sorry?
we talk about the noticing and the agendas?
Sure.
So, I guess the city council agendas have early on in the meeting agenda changes, additions, or deletions to the agenda, and that's common. And then sometimes there are things that are added or deleted from the agenda. And so what are the limitations or opportunities to add things to an agenda that has not been agendized?
It's very limited. There is a process for adding an agenda item that, after the agenda's been posted, but it only applies to business that has to be conducted that night, the need for which came to the attention of the body after the agenda was posted. I've never seen it justifiably used for any of our bodies other than the council. We've used it at the council. I've invoked it myself for both public items and closed session items. But I am hard pressed to think of a circumstance where one of the subordinate bodies would be able to make the necessary findings. Has to be approved by a 4/5 vote. And the way it works is, first there's an action to add the item, and if it gets added, then the item can be conducted. Otherwise, and the reason why it's such a narrow exception is for the one I already gave, that because the participatory purpose of the Brown Act.
And then I guess this is maybe a question for Rihanna, but actually coming up with a form of agenda which is more functional, is that something we need to agendize and discuss, or are we planning on doing that later this meeting?
That is something that we are working on holistically with all the committees and the commissions right now, that Kendall Sawyer, our clerk, is working on, for the reason that it's such a big effort to shift back to in-person meetings, that we're trying to have consistency to help staff that are supporting the bodies provide adequate support and have some continuity in terms of how they're running their meetings. So it's not something that is being opened up right now to the individual bodies to redo their agenda structure. The one that you have, the one I'm looking at right now, is totally based on the council agendas in terms of its structure and sequence. So it totally tracks to that, so it's not abnormal.
This is a different topic, but I'm, I guess, taking the liberty of talking about it now. Is this going to happen by the next meeting, this standardization?
I don't know. I don't know when
Okay.
it's gonna happen precisely. But we can check with Kendall and see what, if there's an estimate.
Eric, I think this is the new agenda, because it doesn't say new business or old business anymore. It's just, what is the new caption for it?
Public hearings and matters for consideration, that one?
Yeah, because that's new for CCBs.
Okay. Part of what's happening too, behind the scenes, is that we're using a new software agenda management system called PrimeGov, that we're all getting used to putting the agenda items into it, the consistency of format that results from that, how attachments work, and all that stuff. So if there is a functional issue that the committee's struggling with, that it would like to be able to do at its meetings, I suggest raising it with staff. And there's probably a way to do it, or a version of it, if it's lawful, if it's permitted under the Brown Act, and it's within your subject matter jurisdiction, consistent with this structure, but we won't know until you raise it, so.
Okay,
It would have to be consistent within that structure.
Yeah, I don't think there's a, I don't think we're equipped right now to, we're kind of doing the opposite thing right now. We're actually trying to get some good standardization, ensure that we are doing Brown Act compliant agendas, and that the staff supporting the bodies are trained on it and comfortable in helping the chairs implement that with the bodies before they're customized.
Well, and also that helps staff that's supporting the bodies. When I need help, I go to my legal department or I go to my clerk, and if we all have our own agendas, then it's difficult for them to help us as well.
Right. And the thing I would say is, I know that sounds like a bureaucratic answer, like it needs to be standardized, but we conduct an immense amount of business with the city council. I mean, if you look at our agendas, you know, last meeting went until 1 a.m. Using this structure, and we can respond to emergencies, and we do, and we can have, you know, the council's the only one that has closed sessions, but we can have presentations, and so it's more versatile than it seems. I would submit to you, and
yeah, I guess I'll just make
Go
a
ahead.
couple comments here. Like when you say we are standardizing, it's the staff that is standardizing, and there hasn't been an opportunity for the bodies to opine on different agenda structures that might work better for this body. And as an observation, I would say the Airport Commission or PBAC, or even the Technology Committee, those agendas, in my opinion, would serve as a better format than the City Council agenda. And so there has not been a forum to provide the commentary that, like, standardizing on the City Council agenda would not be a preference.
because that's not our objective right now, Ben. So that's not the direction we're going in right now. And those bodies are engaged in the same exercise. Because one of the things we've had is inconsistent. It's been very difficult for the staff.
I appreciate that there has been inconsistencies, but when you say the bodies have been going through this, the bodies have been listening to the standardization occur, right? No input from the bodies has occurred, correct?
No, it hasn't been sought, and it's not being sought.
Okay.
And the reason is the one I gave.
I
And
understand
think,
that.
and I think what I'd like to suggest is that if there's a kind of some kind of meeting objective that this body believes is important in terms of fulfilling its purposes, which I read, that you feel is constrained by the standardized meeting format that the council and all the subordinate bodies are using, then, you know, raise that with staff and we can assist. But I strongly suspect that we'll be able to come up with a way to accomplish it in this format.
Yeah, Eric, I think Ben may be suggesting something as a possibility, which is if this body would, an example would be if public comment, where it appears in the, before, at the beginning, or at the end of the meetings, and just the rearrangement based on the business of this committee is, might be slightly different from the council. Would this body have the ability to suggest that, oh, can we move the things around a little bit to meet our agendas better? Is that possible?
It's lawful to do that, council member, but it may catch the public by surprise, and it may catch staff by surprise. So, again, you know, we're trying to go in an opposite direction from that. I mean, it's lawful to do that, and we do it, you know, we do adjust, sometimes switch sequence at the council to, you know, because of
But this,
recusals,
we're
whatever.
seeking consistency across all the committees to be in the same patterns.
We're really trying to do that
So
right now.
Just best to keep it stable according to everybody for the time being is what you're saying.
We're really trying to do that right now. It's really helpful to us in upping the, frankly, the internal support, like from me and from Peggy and from Kendall, for staff like Rihanna, whose job it is to be here with you and help the meetings happen. I would say, you know, if there's refinements that we need to do, once we've got that, we don't even have that in place yet. It was really, used to be the Wild West and not a lot of consistency. So, you know, and, you know, council may give us different direction about that, but that's what we're trying to accomplish right now. I do believe that the subordinate bodies will be better served by that. Certainly the staff serving them will be better served by that. And then we can see, you know, the idea is not to impede the business that's being carried on. The idea is to facilitate it. And if we're hitting roadblocks, we'll need to address that, you know? But typically, you know, Peggy and Patrick and I used to attend these meetings, and I have a sense of what is the business that's addressed, and this is one of those bodies that's innovative and new, there's not a lot of precedent for, and it was a real journey, I think, to get sort of a little bit routinized what you do, and I think, you know, you've done that. And as far as I've seen to date, we've been able to accomplish those things consistent with the Brown Act, and I think this will help us. But, you know, you may disagree, and then we may have issues we need to address, and we'll be glad to address them.
Thank you, Councilmember Shribs. I'll just make two final comments on this point. My preference would be for a standard meeting format that had a regular topic that had a written staff report. So that is my preference. That is the discussion we had at the last meeting. That is the direction I think we provided to the staff, and I think we will work to accommodate that. I see how there will be standardization issues with the agenda, but I do think a written staff report is something that this committee would be supportive of. The second and final comment I'll make on the topic is that for the committee members, my understanding is for the noticing that in order to put something on the agenda that we would like to discuss, that we need to do these at the meeting, right? So that means making a motion for what to add to the agenda. And I don't know if we will be receiving training on that topic, and so I'm raising it now because I do think there have been topics which have not been advanced to an agendized meeting, and I think it's important that we recognize we have the power to add topics to the agenda via a vote of the body. Thank you.
Are you talking about to add it to that evening's meeting or a future meeting?
A future meeting.
Okay, so like under commissioner comments, say, hey, what do you think about addressing this at this meeting? That kind of thing, right?
Correct. I would hope there would be training on that. I don't know if that will be part of that training. If you could sort of impromptu describe the process of making a motion and voting for something like that.
It doesn't even need to be that formal, and remember, the Brown Act is not a parliamentarian thing. It's really a transparency law. So, I mean, what I would suggest is if one of you wants to suggest an agenda item, a business item for a future meeting, to raise that during committee comments. And it can be, it could be simply like, you could be recognized by the chair and say, I'd like to suggest that we agendize X topic for a future meeting. And if there's majority support for that, it can be informal. You could do it by motion, but it could also be informal. You could, you could just, you'll be able to tell.
Okay, I think Ben is also asking, I might ask the same type of question is, okay, between meetings, there's months, a whole month. So 2 weeks before, plenty of noticing, 4 days noticing is fine. So between the meetings, would it be possible that, there's a rich topic that's happening in discussion that we really need to want to get on? And to be able to get it on that very next meeting, is there a process so that a committee member says, recommend to the chair, and then the chair would work with staff to actually get it on that agenda? So it'd get on the agenda, get notified, and that would be okay. That's an okay process. We don't have to do it at the meeting under, at this meeting, we got to set it up for the next meeting, and then we can't do anything in between. I think there's flexibility for the chair and the staff to
Yes.
create that agenda.
Yes,
in
and sometimes
between.
it's just originated by the
So
chair.
just a matter of just generating the process.
Right,
Everything.
right. But what you can't do is have this raise it at a meeting. And, no, let me rephrase that. So what that coordination with the chair doesn't do is the commissioner comment time when a majority of you, or even all of you, can say, yeah, that's great, let's do it. And then Chair Edminster would work with Rihanna to see when that could come back, and it would come back. But you're right, it could be that Ann might reach out to Rihanna, or one of the commissioners might reach out to Ann to suggest, hey, I think
But
this
the
would be
procedure
timely.
is to go through Ann, and then, which would then talk to Rihanna, rather than
Right.
bypassing Ann as the
Right.
chair. I think the proper procedure is to go to
Right.
Ann, say, yes, I want this added in, and Ann will get,
Right.
as long as it's noticed 3 days ahead, you're fine. It can get on the
Yes,
agenda.
now, there's still the issue of whether there's bandwidth for staff to bring it right away or not, and what's
Right,
involved
but
and
it's up to
stuff.
the staff and the chair to
But at
do that
least
link.
you get it on the table for
Get it on the table,
consideration,
yes.
right? And as long as you're not in this reply to all mode, fine.
So I have a couple of more questions about this. So Ben gave an example in which in a meeting, another commissioner might propose a topic and make a motion to have that included in the next agenda. But if we were to take a vote on that, that would be conducting an item of business that in effect wasn't on the agenda.
Yeah, but and that's
It's deciding. to
Setting an
talk
agenda
about it.
isn't
it's still gonna
conducting
come-
business?
No, right.
Okay, so
Right.
there's
Deciding
sort
to
of,
talk about something.
yeah,
And that's
okay.
why I think it's good, especially for, even the council doesn't do formal motions for that.
Right,
They
yeah.
could, but it's nice to not, it's nice to really focus on the substance, so.
Well-
So when it's totally okay
Okay,
for a single member with the concurrence of the rest, or for the full body during that time of the meeting, that's what it's for, to talk about bringing things back on a future agenda. And the reason why is, they're gonna come back. They'll be
Sure.
noticed, and, and you're not gonna decide it right then, you're not gonna say, so totally
it's just,
okay.
we're talking about what you're going to talk about is sort of exempt. Okay,
Yep.
my second question is, and I think this is part of where, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ben's frustration is like he's had things he's wanted to put on the agenda and hasn't been able to essentially enforce that because mostly Rihanna and I kind of look at our list and we do a little horse trading on, what's it going to take to get that in place and, what's more timely, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes, what commissioners ask for doesn't rise to the top for a given month. And so that's the other piece of it, that in essence, we're holding them hostage, as to what topics we actually put before the commission. And so I guess my question is for, in a case like Ben's, where he's really red hot on a certain topic, is there a way for him to essentially, say, darn it, we really need to talk about this sooner than later?
Well, he can say that, but the short answer is no. I mean, what you would do, because you're doing your job with Rihanna to control the business of the body, because it may be that some things aren't getting done, other things are, and you're deciding which ones. And the way, if a member wants to get the support of the other members about bringing something forward, the time to really do that is under the commissioner comments and see if the support's there.
Okay, and so-
Because that way, that gives the chair a chance to reconsider and say, oh, wow, this is making me rethink the priorities because of the level of interest.
Okay, so I guess a couple things about that. What it suggests to me too is when anybody feels really, really strongly about something, probably, as you said, doesn't necessarily even require a motion, but to say, hey, could we have a straw poll? How strongly do other people feel about this? You know, could we, because I think we felt like, oh, we can't have a dialogue on that because it's not on the agenda tonight. So
I
it's
think
kind of a.
There is a difference between
Yeah.
saying we want to talk about
No,
it
no, I understand
versus
now.
we want to actually, I want to take a position on
Yes,
this.
no, I understand.
So as long as you're going to
But
talk about it,
that did need to
it's
be
fine.
clarified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
As long as-
so I think that's really helpful to
Good.
know that.
Good.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
again, it
totally.
doesn't have to be super formal.
No.
So-
It's like, and because talking about why you think it should get a higher priority
Yeah,
is fine, because you're not conducting the business, you're just talking about when and if it's going to
Yeah.
be taken up. Now, you
Thank
still
you.
may have issues of resources or getting an invitee there or whatever, the time factor is, but that's perfectly okay. And the council, I mean, if you think about some of the conversations that happen at the council level about the future agendas, there's horse trading, for sure.
yeah,
And
no,
a
that's
lot of
really
this is in
helpful.
Robert's Rules of Orders type things too, is how to do all that. It's part
Yes.
of the Brown Act. so.
It is, but we don't, in Petaluma, we haven't formally adopted any parliamentary rules. The closest are the council rules. There are some motions defined there. We almost never use them. The only one that they've used is the motion to reconsider. It's very complex.
Okay,
And I really am I'm a real advocate for, especially for the committees and commissions, not being overly procedural, staying focused on the business, having productive informality, I would call it. And you can still have some procedural debating and discussion about what ought to get your attention when.
sure.
Totally
yeah.
okay. Totally
But that's
okay.
helpful. I think it's also helpful for all of us as commissioners to recognize that sort of, in this case, myself and Rihanna are the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
That is our sort of given function. And, sometimes what people want to rise to the top doesn't necessarily, again, because closer, between meetings, things happen that isn't necessarily, able to be brought back to everyone. So thanks a lot for clarifying that, Eric.
Sure.
I would like to also add that there are some topics that this commission is very adamant about bringing forward that even I'm not the gatekeeper for. And
What, like, that are on the margins of its authority, or they just are bigger resource questions?
specifically the memo from Schutz and.
Shoot
Oh, the
Mahaly.
Shoot Mahaly memo, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
What?
So this is a topic that we have had in our queue for quite a number of months. There's research that's been done by a law firm about certain powers given to cities and the mechanisms for accomplishing them that are relevant to legislative work that we would like to see done by the city relative to residential electrification. And we really want to hear from those experts what those mechanisms are. We feel it would be beneficial for the community to hear that. And it's been our understanding that staff, Eric, has not been quite ready for us to have that presentation.
So,
So-
we're gonna go way outside of the Brown Act, to something else, and I will tell you that, I've reviewed that memo closely. And it is, contains legal argument, but it's not legal advice. And it touches on issues of powers of cities and limits to the powers, whether they're statutory or constitutional, federal or state. It takes advocacy positions that I don't necessarily think are, that are not without risk. And it is not legal advice from your legal, from my office. And so it is not what the city decision makers can rely upon to base their decision making. It's an advocacy piece. And I think it is an advocacy piece that is consonant with some of the things that you want to do and are charged to do. Definitely. But it's not a fit basis for you to go forward with policy action.
But the reality is, we don't make policy actions. We only
you
make
make
recommendations.
recommendations.
And certainly, I think that anything we would hear before us, we would anticipate that you would frame in just the manner that you did. But I think that we have a duty to bring this type of information to the public, who speak to us all the time on these topics. And this is important information that many other cities have certainly considered. I'm sure they also, like you, don't consider it to be legal advice. It is opinion, certainly.
Right, well, and
But
it's-
nevertheless, appropriate content for us to be looking at.
Well, sure. I mean, it's publicly available. It's not privileged, right? It's out there. And I think the thing is, if there are programs or policies or studies or whatever kind of action that you want to recommend that the council take or that you want to take, then I think you need to agendize that, and we can review the legal implications of that. And you can certainly, there are what that memo addresses is different kinds of potential regulatory actions, right? And those may be things you want to recommend as priorities. And you may want to do it for some of the reasons that are articulated in the memo. But the reason why when we do legal analysis, it's privileged to the body that holds the privilege, which is the city council, is because we're able to advise them confidentially about what the risk factors may be so that they can weigh them. And because that legal advice, actual legal advice, is not out in the public forum, it's not a potential constraint on their decision-making. So you don't have the public saying, well, geez, why are you going against your own legal advice? Or you don't have the public saying, why are you so risk-averse that you're being prevented by your legal advice from addressing things that are totally critical to the viability of human culture and the planet. So that is why I would encourage you to not be focused on discussion of the memo. You can disseminate it all you want. I think I would suggest that your focus ought to be on the programs or policies or initiatives that are addressed there and which ones you want to see advanced so that we can do our normal staff work in relation to those.
So, for example, would you deem it to be appropriate, for example, I haven't looked at the thing for quite a long time, but let's say there were a city that had adopted one of the stances or acted on the basis of one of the stances covered in the memo. If we were to say, well, we'd like to hear from someone at the city of Kennebunkport, Maine, about their ordinance, because we think that would be an appropriate model for us. Is that something that
Sure.
you would
Sure.
object to?
No.
Okay.
No, of course not.
All right.
Because that's you, looking at best practices, looking
Okay.
at exemplars from other age, and it's in your lane of sort of initiatives, policies, potential solutions, and that stuff, and then we can play a support role about that, and are happy to, and it's not like the discussion in that memo is not relevant or doesn't address relevant,
Right.
authorities and stuff. It does.
Well, this is really helpful because I think we've been a little puzzled as to, why we haven't seen movement on that. And I think I understand better now that perhaps in some ways this is a problem of optics, that if we hear from another legal firm and that stance appears to be in opposition to our legal counsel's advice, then it's sort of like, okay, who are we listening to?
Well, it's not so much optics, I would say, Ann. It's more like, it's more of a lane thing and a sequence or focus thing. So, you know, as I just tried to indicate, you know, I'm so happy and proud the kind of relationship that our office has with the rest of city management and the council. They really take our recommendations seriously, but they don't always follow them, because what may be the most, what I think may be the most legally sound path or the least risk path, they may conclude is not the best one for the community. And that's, I respect that so much. That's their job. You know, the safest thing is to stop what we're doing and all go home, right? But we're here to serve the public and be the most responsive form of government, and a crucible for innovation. That's what local government is supposed to be in our structure. So that stuff's great, but one of the most important reasons that the attorney-client privilege exists and the work product privilege exists, so that the decision makers can consider that input confidentially, is so that for the very reason that they can make those decisions, you know, and that the advice can be as candid as it needs to be, and the feedback can be as, you know, some of those closed session discussions, they're as candid gets, and that's important too, because those are serious decisions that are being made. So so it could be that you focus on some of the initiatives, program initiatives that are addressed, you know, things like what? Requiring that when appliances fail, they're replaced with all electric, say, and, you know, incentive programs to do that kind of stuff. That's a core, you know, that's totally consistent with your subject matter jurisdiction we were just reading from, right?
Right.
And some of those things are addressed in the memo, and you may want to come forward with that, and we may do some background analysis as it's going through the sort of recommendation process, and the decision makers may prefer the analysis in the Shuba-Haley memo to ours, or they may prefer the outcome of that decision to ours, and that's totally their prerogative.
Okay.
But that's, and I can, you know, if there are more questions about that, we can, you know, address them further, but that's how you can move forward in a way that's totally consistent with your charge, and I can still play the role I'm charged by the voters to play in the statutes and the law and the oath I took, just like you all did, to play, and I'm not in charge. I'm not supposed to be in charge. I'm just an advisor.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
That's
Ann,
really
can-
helpful.
Can I just ask a quick question? I think I personally would like to explore this more, not maybe this time. I don't want to take too much more time, and I really appreciate you explaining the position of council as it relates to this matter. I think the issue I have is that there seems to be a catch-22 here where you described our lane as making recommendations on policy, but policy is inextricably linked with the regulatory function of a city. And so if I want to be educated on how a city can legally adopt these rules that we all think are critical, then how am I supposed to learn about it in a way with my fellow commissioners, in a way that also conforms to the Brown Act and informing the public, if we can't have a presentation on this memo?
Because, because you can have presentation on the policies that are recommended in the memo, and we can talk about.
How can we make recommendations for a city if council's opinion is that those regulations fall outside of the city's power? And if that's the position of council, then how can we even make those recommendations, right? Does that make sense?
You could, but I think it'd be a waste of time, right? Because you know, if it really is, the legal term is ultra vires, if it's outside your powers, then what's the point? But, you know, some of those things are debatable or close calls and not like easy calls. Again, what I would urge you to do is look at the initiatives in terms of ones that you want to recommend, I would say look at them in terms of prioritization and all the things you consider, like bang for the buck, low hanging fruit versus, things that need to be started immediately, even if they're hard because they need to stop, they need to reduce carbon footprint now. And bring those, forward in your meeting management kind of way. And then when they're policy initiatives you're pursuing, then we can address those things with you. And we can talk about, we did we've innovated. We've regulated about gas stations. We've regulated about electric requirements in the code. And we looked in depth at those things. And our regulations, unlike those in neighboring jurisdictions, were not litigated. There's a reason why they were not litigated, because they weren't subject to litigation. And that was because we did that work in the background, and it wasn't a staff-initiated program, it was a council-directed program. It was in the goals and objectives. And I assure you, we provided them advice about how we thought we could do that, and we did it. And this body is an important part of that constellation of policymaking. So it totally can be done, and we'll be happy to facilitate it, and including by helping develop a shared understanding of what our powers are and are not, because we know a lot about that.
But I appreciate the indulging me on that a bit, and maybe we can explore this further at another time. That I didn't
We
take
could,
them anymore.
sure, and for example, we could have a session, if it were helpful, to talk about a little bit about local government regulatory powers in relation to some of these things. We could talk about how the California Building Standards Code framework, the Energy Code framework, some of you know more about the substance of that than I do. What I know about is the legal structure of it and how we can make local amendments, and we did that for the REACH code and stuff like that. So we can talk about that if that helped. I still think, and this is something I tell the council too. We just finally got there with the tenant regulations, where instead of starting out with legislation, we did start out with legislation, but there was concerns by all the different stakeholders that we should have started out with stakeholder conversations, focused on objectives for the legislation, and then delivered it. So we finally had the stakeholder conversations. We finally got the direction from the council about features or policies, and now we're going to bring back the legislation. So that's a really good sequence, because if the recommending bodies, the Brown Act bodies, start with their policy objectives, then we can powerfully assist you in implementing them. And also, and sometimes we say, you know what? We fear that will be an unsuccessful path because of limits to our powers or whatever the reason is. But then it's our job to come up with the path that works for you. And we can usually do it. But what's the most successful, in my experience, way is to start with the policy initiatives, so we know where you're trying, because anyway, that we can really, it's our job to assist with that, and we're happy to, and I feel like that has this body, like the other bodies, in the position of really playing its role of being a policy advising body, a best standards viewing and recommending body, and a climate response innovating body, an educatory body of not only the community but of staff. I think those are all key things we look to you to do.
I have one follow-up question, which is that if this group makes a recommendation, that is kind of heading into a more complex legal area, would it be something that you would then examine based on our recommendation, or would it have to be approved by council, or would council have to direct you to act on it? In which case, then you would come back with I can see this way of doing it, or I can see that way of doing it, you'd have that conversation with council. I'm just kind of wondering, when does this body, so two questions, you know, when do you act on it? And also, when does this body find out what we want, we can't get, you know, or we can't get it in the way that we want it, and therefore you're innovating? Because I think that's kind of a frustration too. It feels like kind of goes down a black hole, and we're like, okay,
Yeah.
where'd that go? You
Well,
know?
Those are fair questions. We're just about, I mean, next Monday, we're gonna have that council goals discussion, the first big piece of it, to revisit the current, like, 2-year goal work plans and try to, you know, we'll be providing the council and the community updates about where we are, and, you know, things like, you know, progress and challenges and bandwidth and stuff, and the council's gonna wanna prioritize, it's their prerogative to do it. And it's citywide, and that's a forum for some of these questions. And we really haven't done we haven't really connected that with what the commissions and the committees are doing as much, but there are some connections even already, because, for example, the climate action plan that's going forward as part of the general plan is, you know, is you know, in the wheelhouse of this commission, and that's a council priority. The general plan's a council priority, the cap is a council priority. So, the pieces of it, I think, by definition, are priorities. And so, if, you know, as that's, and I don't know what the cross-fertilization between you, how it's working between you and the, you know, community development department and the general plan development process. And maybe it's getting to the point where it's going to start to be closer or more frequent.
We had ad hoc working group meetings over the last 2 weeks.
Okay, so it's starting now.
It's completed for this phase is completed.
Okay, cool. So that's one way.
Right, but so if we were to say, okay, you know, as a body, our top 5 policy recommendations that we would like to see, you know, go through a legal process, we vote on that, and these are our top 5 for this half of 2023, then that would go to council, and hopefully they would then say, we're hearing this from the Climate Action Commission, that these are their top 5 things that we need to get moving on, and then hopefully they would then vote up and down on those measures.
I don't think it's set up right now to take that from each of the commissions, say, and go right into up-down votes from them.
So the process that we did last year, and I have not received guidance for this year, but I'm intuitively feeling that it'll be very similar to last year, is we did the first workshop with council with goals and priorities. Then we came back to commissions to draft recommendations, which you did last year.
Yeah.
We sent those to council, and then we went back to council with another workshop where they actually listed their priorities.
Okay, so that's how you do it. And what happens is that ends up being marching orders for the rest of us, me, the other departments, Public Works, whoever.
I think that, I don't know if everyone would agree with me, but I think one of the things that struggle with being on the Climate Action Commission is that time is not our friend. You know, and so the normal process and procedures and the time that it takes to make things happen, oftentimes you feel like you're not doing your job because they're not happening fast enough, you know. And so I wonder if there's a way that we can look at this mechanism to make it a little more efficient, you know, so that things could flow more quickly to the attention of council and staff.
Potentially there is, but I think in what Rihanna just described, I think you're going to want to identify as best as you can those things.
Yeah.
So that when the feedback comes back to the council from the subordinate bodies, then it factors into the priorities they actually set. The thing is, that's hard, you know, is this is literally a global issue. It's not going to be solved in Petaluma in terms of impact, but it might be in terms of leadership and models, right? And collaboration that's set up, and coordination that's set up, that becomes regional and broader. But we also still have a city to run. We still have, you know, fire department that needs to work, and and police department that needs to work, and water and sewer utilities that need to work, and this is the staff that does all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't have the luxury of stopping, so we need to work these really really urgent, global considerations that affect how we do those other things that need to, into all that.
Yeah, but the cycle of only looking at it once a year, I think it maybe is not quite
Well, then that's,
accelerated enough. That's the point I'm trying to
I
make.
would encourage you to raise that when you give your feedback to the council regarding
Okay,
the priorities.
Well, and also each of those actions, each of those priorities have milestones that are much shorter in duration than once a year. And if we continually evaluate and put all of our resources going through the evaluation process, then we're not doing the work to move those projects forward. Because it takes a lot of staff time to go through the evaluation process.
And our implementation is so multidisciplinary. I mean, one of the things that I love about how we function now, and I think it's really the only way to be effective, is we just bring all the interdisciplinary resources to bear that the issues need. Development projects.
What happens if we get halfway through a project and then city council's goals and priorities shift, and all of a sudden we have to stop what we're doing to shift towards a new goal and priority because we've reevaluated before we were able to finish that task?
And, you know, and maybe some things just aren't that important and maybe shouldn't have been priorities in the first place, but I haven't seen those. And it's just a lot, it's a pretty big, it's a lot of coordination that happens to do things well, including some of these things we talked about, like reach codes and stuff. It's building, it's planning, it's legal. So, anyway, I'm just trying to be candid and really responsive to you and not, like, it's hard and it takes a long time and, we're finite. It's important, we're here to do these hard things. Work isn't for everybody. I think the difficulty of it is tied directly to the importance of it and the impact, and that's why we're here doing it, because that matters to us. So, and we're still, the city's evolving, it's rebuilding. This body is a big part of it changing its orientation to how it's the traditional ways of doing things, the tools for doing things, the measures for doing things, what's done. So
I'd like to say, so the reason I brought this up originally under the umbrella of setting agenda topics is because, yes, Ann and I work together to elevate topics that the commission want to bring, but an equal consideration as your staff liaison, like, yes, I have to take in consideration what the commission would like to hear, but I also have to take in consideration city liability, what's within my purview, what am I allowed to do? And so some of it will be able to move forward, but some of it I would need support and or guidance and or have to come to terms with the fact that it's not going to go anywhere. I'm in that delicate balance of being the staff liaison for both the commission and the city.
and you're entitled to answers, right? If there's obstacles, because this is, we're here to support your role, we respect your role. So, anyway, so that's very far from the Brown Act, but I can tell it's something that was more important for you to talk about, so happy to talk about it.
Thanks. I just, I was opaque earlier. That was the conversation I wanted to surface, so I appreciate it. One final, more technical question. I had heard that when putting something on the agenda that it needed a staff report. I don't know, is there some minimum amount of staff work that needs to be done to put something on the agenda that we should be cognizant of? Or is it simply a sentence on an agenda?
So,
Can I speak to this for
Sure.
just a moment?
sure.
So being new-ish to this commission, I looked to other people that were holding this position, this role before me, and the direction that I was given was anything that goes on business needs a staff report. But at the same time, I was directed, because staff reports have to be reviewed by Peggy, Finance, Legal, before they can be posted. So the direction I was given was less staff reports. Please, less staff reports. And so I had a follow-up conversation with Peggy just this last week, because I was like, do I really write a staff report about this orientation and training that's going to go under business and agenda? And I was given the direction that there's a certain level of discretion that I have within my role to determine whether or not a staff report is needed for that topic. But again, the direction I was given was less staff reports if possible.
So in terms of the Brown, I'm sorry, Councilmember.
So I was chair of the tree committee for several years, so I had lots of these types of discussions. And I got a similar response from the staff member I was working with in that committee. However, there's a difference between presentations, workshops, and business. So for the business part, yeah, definitely, if there's going to be business and decision-making type things that are going on, then yeah, the staff has to weigh in. But if it's a workshop to discuss, or if it's a presentation, no, the staff report's not needed. So as long as it's not a decision-making process where staff has to get involved and do things that the city may be, if you're just gathering information and learning about it and doing things, it doesn't have to have, so by putting it in the right place of the agenda, you can avoid the staff report unless you're actually seeking a decision-making thing. If you're doing that, then yes, staff reports are going to be necessary.
And I would like for it to be very clear, it's not because I don't want to write staff reports. It's not a personal decision on me. I'm not the one taking the stance. I just want to make sure that I'm doing my job correctly on all sides.
And I can tell you, Brianna writes perfectly nice staff reports. So it's a couple things. The Brown Act doesn't prescribe whether staff reports are needed or not. All the Brown Act prescribes is what needs to go into the agenda to give notice, like we talked about, so the public can choose to participate or not. The posting of the agendas, the sharing of information related to the items, like, so if there's memos that go to a majority of the body related to business coming before you, then those need to be shared, et cetera. So, and the agenda description is, up to about 20 words that gives fair notice about what's going to be occurring. I think the guide for you really is, what are you going to transact? For tonight, this is pretty workshop-ish, I would say, presentation-ish. I don't think a staff report adds anything. If you're going to be making a specific recommendation about a policy or something to the council, it needs to be clear what that is, right? That's going to need a staff report, I think. Do you need it to facilitate your deliberation and action, to make clear what the output is? If not, no. I mean, sometimes, you get presentations from outside bodies. You look at outside information, samples, data, studies. I think it depends on what you're doing with it. Because it should be value added. If staff are doing the work to prepare it and you're doing the work to review it and we're sharing with the public so they can, should be taking us somewhere, I think. And that's a little squishy, I grant you, but we can help sort of. And I'm good. I think it's good that Rihanna has that flexibility to work with the chair to do that. I think all the commissions and committees need that, and we can just navigate it. And if there are questions, we can address them.
So now you have 10 minutes to go through the next 30 slides.
Well, which I don't think any of us want to be subjected to. We talked about the agenda management thing about future agendas. That's an important one. It's similarly, there can be sort of brief responses and stuff to things. And at this point, I'm on slide 26, if you want to. Because I don't think you don't do special meetings, do you, for this body? No.
We have occasionally done them, kind of like when we wanted to do like a public workshop.
Okay.
We would hold a special meeting.
The thing I'll say about that is, for purposes of the Brown Act, in Brown Act land, any meeting that gets 72 hours notice is a regular meeting. In city council land, meetings that get only 24 hours notice are a special meeting. I don't think you've ever done those. I don't think it's unlikely there'd be a need for it. So, and there's even emergency meetings, there's some special things there, there's closed session stuff. That doesn't relate to you really. And adjourned meetings, no. There are decorum rules. I don't think you've ever had issues of like unruly participants and stuff. We have rules for dealing with that, and we can assist with that and resources about that, but that's nice that you haven't had that. I think the business about like if
The public comments part, were you gonna skip over that?
no, I was gonna talk about like the limited discussion you can have like in response to things from the public or.
Flipping through, trying to match where he's at. I'm like, looking.
So, I'm sorry, I'm making it terrible for you. Why don't you go with your question? Ben?
Okay,
Sorry.
I mean, we have a couple, regulars, and I am a regular at other meetings, right? And we have followed a practice of having a pretty strict 3-minute limitation per speaker and a 15-minute or 20-minute limitation per meeting. And in reading the ordinance, I understand there's a bit more flexibility in that, and that, certain people that are viewed as, community members or on the topic are allowed to speak up to 10 minutes, and that we can also grant more time for general public comment if we so choose. And so I'd simply like to surface that while in practice, people have been limited to 3 minutes, that actually the rules allow for much greater flexibility. And my personal opinion is, this room used to be full, and that was because people are passionate on this topic and wanted to provide public comments, and the rigidity of the process has sort of left us with an empty room. And so I would like us to reconsider how we do general public comment to encourage people to discuss this topic.
Okay, well, you don't have separate meeting rules. I was just looking to see if you had, looks like you could promulgate them, but as I said, I think we're in kind of a mode right now with all the subordinate bodies of not doing that. I would encourage you to conform to the council meeting practices in the absence of separate ones. I would also say that the 10 minutes that you referred to, Ben, that's the council does that on for when it's in a quasi adjudicatory capacity on one of those decisions that involve substantive due process rights, like a development application, and that's to hear from the proponent, and if there are opponents, to hear from them. Otherwise, they use the regular public comment time allotment. A lot of very substantive things can be said in 3 minutes or even 2. And I think consistency is important so that there's no concerns that we're favoring some viewpoints over others or some speakers over others. That's actually a constitutional thing. So I would suggest that you stick to those frameworks, and if you really get a sense that they're impeding your business or the participation of the public, you can raise it with the chair and with staff, and we can look at that. But yeah, do you have a?
And Ben, I was just going to add too, I've attended, I think, virtually every meeting of this commission since it was created, and it's always adhered to the 3-minute rubric, and I don't think that's ever squelched participation. Further, I've been participating in public meetings for the better part of my adult life. Everybody that I've ever participated in has held to that standard. And But a caveat is, especially in this in-person format, many times I've been in meetings where people will submit their name multiple times. So, they get put in the queue and, if they put their card in again, their name comes up again and they have another opportunity to speak. Particularly on controversial topics, many meetings I've gone to have not enforced the 20-minute limit at all. If people show up and want to speak, I've never been to a meeting where that's been cut off. And John, I imagine that 1 a.m. meeting, you probably didn't say, oh, I'm sorry. We've been through 20 minutes, so we heard from whatever, 7 of you and the other 14 who are waiting too bad, right?
Well, the way the council does it is they only set that limit on general public comment, so on items not on the agenda. And I think there have been times when they've gone as low as 1 minute for like incredibly large numbers of people who wanted to speak, but that was so that everybody gets to speak.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. And thank you for reminding me that that's general public comment only.
Right.
So I think the biggest reason that attendance has dropped off has been COVID. That it's not much fun to show up. People are sick of Zoom. So that's my view. And frankly, there are some people, if I had to listen to for more than 3 minutes, that would deter me from attending a meeting. Naming no names.
So,
Just saying.
so it is an adjustment time. I mean, a lot of the members of the public, it was easier to participate remotely, and so we're back live, and I think that's a factor. I also think that when things start really rolling again in terms of the climate action plan, people are going to come back. That's just my guess. So, and I could be wrong, but we're scheduled to go till 8:30. Is that right? Or is that even?
Sure.
Well, I don't know. I don't want
Have
to.
we ever cut off at 8:30?
Because what I would say is, if you have, let's go into question mode. So I don't think special meetings are relevant to you. We've talked about the noticing and stuff. We've talked about a lot of meeting management things, and even some sort of specific things you want to bring forward and have felt stymied things. And I'm glad we're talking about those things because I think they're more important to you anyway. I would say if there are other questions you have about meeting transparency requirements, or if you want to switch to document transparency, or even a little bit about conflicts of interest, I'm prepared we can zoom forward and talk about those. If you've had enough to process and you want to, you have your committee comments and staff comments left, it's up to you. I'm here at your pleasure, and I don't want to bore you or go into information overload, so.
Well, this has been hugely helpful. So I will just take a straw poll of the commission, whether, first of all, anybody have any burning questions left, or would you guys like to maybe digest? We really appreciate getting the written materials as well. And we know where to find you,
The
so,
presentation was posted with the agenda?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. So I know I got an opportunity to preview that. So,
I just had one
Dave? Yeah.
question, somewhat to Ben's point about public participation. I think that public participation is critical, and one thing I was interested in that we had talked about earlier is the ability for the public to interact with commissioners as part of ad hoc, committees. And so, are there any limitations we should know about where we're inviting the public to meet with ad hoc committees so that they can feel like their voices are being heard in a way that's a little bit more give and take, less structured around a 3-minute window of speaking opportunities? I'm just trying to think of ways we can have the passionate community members engage with us on the topics for which our ad hoc committees are charged in a way that people can feel like they're really getting their points across, and we might get some ideas from them that we you know, 3 minutes just may not really be enough time to flesh those ideas out. And there's a lot of really smart people out in the community that can inform our ad hocs. So just curious how that, if there's any limitations there.
So, so I guess some thoughts in response to that. Remember, the ad hocs are really established to do a particular job they're charged with doing, and then once they're done, they dissolve. So I think the question becomes, or one question becomes, what involvement of members of the public is necessary or helpful to the discharging of that responsibility, whatever it is. And that can help guide, you know, how to set that up. But in terms of like ideas of like members of the public having their voices be heard, that usually best happens before the full body in this setting, including with respect to subcommittee work, when the subcommittee's presenting it to the rest of the commission, and people can, you know, sound off about it. But I think it's more common for ad hoc committees that don't have to meet in this setting, whose meetings are not agendized, to meet with people that they need to meet with to do what they're doing. We've had council subcommittees meet with staff. Ad hoc subcommittees meet with staff about, you know, questions and answers about what they're working on to bring back to the full council. And that could be similar with commission subcommittees. So again, I think it's helpful. I would suggest that it's helpful to look first at what it is you want to accomplish, what it is that the subcommittee is charged with and needs to do, and if that's if that implicates outside people or bodies or experts or whatever. I mean, maybe it's a field trip to another organization. That's fine. That's fine. It could be a whole, as I told you from the exception, it could be a whole full commission field trip even.
So as a follow-up to that, thank you, that's helpful. Would it be appropriate during this meeting, if there are members of the public, to say, hey, you commented on EV charging, and this is our our ad hoc, this is what we're charged with, feel free to email me, we can meet on it. Is that kind of invitation okay during a meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For example, you could talk about the things that different subcommittees working on and provide like how members of the public can send suggestions. Staff can even help set up like an email thing that's shared among the subcommittee members. Goes to all of them. We did a version of that for the tenant protections for stakeholder, interested members of the public to send emails that went to a whole bunch of us all at once, and including the clerks. So you can totally do that.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Other questions or comments from commissioners?
Well, I'll just say one. When we put the climate framework together, we talked to a lot of people in the community, because there are so many people who really know things that we don't know. So we reached out to them, they participated. We had, it wasn't agendized, but we got a lot of helpful information. They appreciated feeding it to us and seeing what came out. We put it all together. So we built on the strength of this community, and that helps, the stuff to implement. If people are invested in it in the beginning, all the more chance they're going to continue to participate going forward. So this is a wonderful community, and we want to take advantage of it so we can have that leadership opportunity. So
Thanks, Commissioner. So that was a subcommittee structure. Was it by chapter or groups of chapter? I thought it was by chapter, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And the different ad hoc subcommittees reached out to either more or less focus in ways they wanted to, and they got input and did drafting, and it ended up going to staff for more drafting and restructuring. And that's what gave us the climate emergency framework that we have now. I refer to it all, you know what, where I keep pulling it down to refer to it in the environmental impact section of our staff reports about and the climate impact section, because I'll look to see, you know, under which of the chapters of the CEF, like it might be the equity part, it might be, you know, the other parts like sequestration or whatever, like some of the things that Parks and Rec is doing or Public Works. So it's been a great reference. I use it. So, and it came about from quite a bit of interaction of the committee members formed into subcommittees, ad hoc ones, connecting with community members. Yep, that's a great, thank you for that. That's a great example. Because I suspect you'll do more of that. That was, I think, a method that really worked for this body, and there's probably more in your future.
Yeah, thanks, both of you, Ned and Eric, for bringing that forward. There's a huge precedent for that. I mean, dozens, scores of people were involved in that process. So, yeah, there's a incredible resource. Gosh, I had a stray thought I was going to add to that. Lost track. So, shall we consider this agenda item? Shall we consider this agenda item a wrap for now? And again, we know where to find you, and I think a much better sense as a result of this conversation as to sort of where the edges of concern are and when it'll be appropriate to reach out. So, candidly, much more useful than I anticipated, so thank you.
I'm delighted to hear that,
So it's only my third, maybe fourth Brown Act training, so I was like, oh, God, root canal.
Oh, great. Oh, great, an hour on the Brown Act, I can't wait.
It's your lucky day.
Thanks
okay,
very
so-
much. And I just want to note, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but this committee has to make it up as it goes, and it's harder. I'm currently the president of the City Attorney's Department of the California League of Cities, and I've done a lot of committee chair work for the department. And we have a committee called the Attorney Development Succession Committee, which was a brand new committee about helping welcome junior members into the department and having them feel welcome, helping advance their careers, helping with knowledge transfer from more senior members like me to more junior members, promoting equity in the department. A lot of cool things and challenging things, and it never existed before that committee. And one of the reasons why I have kind of a special place in my heart for this committee is because I know how hard it is to make it up as you go. And we had to come up with a subcommittee structure. It's standing subcommittees for them. And so it makes all these things harder than it is for, we've had planning commissions for decades, and it's a lot more established, and it's not as much for you. So that's why I think there does have to be some of these discussions every now and then as the need arises. And I think it will continue to help, and we did it with the ADSC too, to focus on what we're trying to accomplish and then develop the tools for that. And that was effective for us, and I've seen you do it too. And the CEF subcommittees is a great example of that. So anyway, that's my sort of pep talk and recognition that I know it's harder, and that's why we need to work together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's definitely a key factor here, that, we don't have a precedent and a history and sort of well-established groove. So, let's see, I guess we move on now to commissioner
Thank you
comments.
very much. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Good night.
Thanks for having me.
You're not going to stick around for commissioner comments?
I have a sad little kitty waiting for me.
Oh, go take care of the kitty. Good night. Okay, commissioner comments. Anybody?
I got one.
Oh,
By all means.
I would like to support an agenda item for this body that we ask the general plan consultants to give us a review of the adaptation measures that are in the general plan. And that we get a sense of how and where they will appear in the general plan. And would love to have a discussion on this body whether or not there should be a chapter on adaptation or a summary in the CAP.
Can I
Great suggestion, and could you maybe shoot Rihanna and me a quick blurb to that effect? There was a lot there, and I don't want to lose. Oh, you did?
Yeah, I tried to say it in a way without prefacing with all my opinions around it, just so
No,
that we
that's-
get it on our agenda, but,
Yeah,
yeah, I can send that to you, no problem.
great.
This was going to be my commissioner comment, but I did make a similar question to Ramey about where is the adaptation in the general plan. They did say there was some sort of disaster section, and they did say that they were planning on the GPAC addressing some of that topic. And my suggestion was to have a joint meeting of the GPAC and this body on that adaptation topic, because that would at least allow us to opine in addition to GPAC. And so that is both the roots of where the section might be and also what the plan had been. And, you know, to further your, request, I do think we should discuss it, but I think doing it as a joint body might be possibly more effective or allow us at least that opportunity.
I like that suggestion. How does everybody else feel?
I think it's a great suggestion. My one concern about not having that information in the climate action plan is because that's where a lot of people are gonna go look for that information. They're not gonna go look in the general plan for adaptation measures. So I do think that there's a separate topic, which is what should be in the climate adaptation and action adaptation plan.
Yeah, that's,
So I think it makes sense
Yeah.
to have a joint conversation, but I'd also like this body to take it up as a business item and make a vote on what we want to be in the CAP.
yeah, that's it. Brings up another interesting topic, which has troubled me off and on, which is, I don't, and John, this is a council liaison, this is a comment that I'd love to have you perhaps try to help us resolve. It's never been clear to me what the relationship is between the Climate Action Adaptation Plan and the general plan. So my understanding is they're both being worked on by Ramey. In my worldview, the CAP would sit over and govern everything that is in the general plan, but how those are structured has never been clear. And what the relationship is between the two of them. Are they separate? Is one nested within the other? Does one control the other? I don't know the answer to that, and I would like to.
Well, my impression is that they're two separate things, and that the general plan is more of a visionary overview, big picture type of viewpoint, and not in specifics. So there'll be recommendations and things that go along that need to be included, but when your adaptation plan, you can do with this committee, my viewpoint was this thing, you can make it as detailed and as much as you can to get down and really drill down into all the specifics of where you would like to go. And therefore, this would be the detailed report behind the general vision in the general plan. So yes, the general plan will say, okay, we're going to adapt in these types of ways. There'll be a list of some sort. But, and please refer to this, your plan that you develop for more specific options and opportunities to do things. So I see that as a subset of the general plan up here. And this is more where you really can do what you want to do and get all the details in, even place and time and location of specific projects, work on what you're suggesting, and give as many ideas as you can to the city council and staff to do. So I'd say go your separate way and develop a detailed plan options and things. And then the general principles will get floated into the general plan and work with the general plan folks, because I was on the general plan with you guys. And that way you're a combination of separation, but also inclusive within, in subset. And please work with the work group that's on there and give your advice in there to make sure that everything is connected and transitional and smooth and actually they're linked and they'll work together very easily. That's my
Thanks.
viewpoint.
Well, that's helpful, and certainly, as a former member of the GPAC, you obviously have some pretty good insights. I think, Rihanna, this is a great indication that we could have a very rich conversation with the Ramey team, not only about the, recommendations of the specific ad hocs, but about this topic in particular and sort of the relationship of the CAP to the larger document and, all of this. So, yeah,
Can
let's,
I add something?
yeah, sure, please do.
I'll just add that I attended a ASLA, American Society of Landscape Architecture's annual conference in October, and there was a presentation by a firm in San Francisco that's looking at sea level rise adaptation in San Francisco. And they're looking at, they've been hired by the Port Authority of San Francisco, and they are studying 7 miles of waterfront in San Francisco, looking at 3.5 feet of sea level rise by 2050 and 7 feet of sea level rise by 2100. And so that's quite a bit of money that the Port of San Francisco has put down to study this issue. And what happens when you put a wall on the edge of the water is all the water that's coming in from all the creeks and everything behind it. You have to deal with all of that. You have to deal with all of your drainage systems. So my point is that that's a massive undertaking that they're looking at. It's a massive expenditure, and we also are a community on the bay. And so those kinds of things need to really come forward in this adaptation plan, and we won't be doing our job if they don't. And there will be federal funding and state funding for the communities that have a plan.
Okay, so my report as a liaison, do I come in with the commission reports in this meeting, or do I come separate as a separate thing along with staff? No, is my time here, because I can answer some of that.
Good.
Yeah, that's a good question. Eric's left already. This is kind of a,
I think it's just his time too, right?
I just want,
oh, for sure, it's his time
no,
too.
yeah, for sure, you do.
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
here.
No, I guess my question was more about like how much information do we exchange before this becomes an item?
Discussion.
Yeah,
right.
a discussion. So we're not,
I can give you a report that might give you some indications.
okay, yeah, I think as so long as you're reporting,
I'm
we're
reporting
good.
on
We're not
what I
going to
know,
make any
what
decisions.
I'm going
or-
to bring, my job is to bring information to you guys.
Excellent, and
of what
vice
I know,
versa.
And vice versa.
Carried away and
And
bring
exchange your information up to the council.
Yeah,
That's
right.
why I'm here. That's the liaison job.
absolutely. So,
And
yes.
try not to influence too much.
No, that's, you're a member, so,
Right.
yes, go on with your comments.
I'll cover the water first. The two meetings I attended was with there's a larger water committee that Councilmember Mike Healy is actually the chair of, for the entire, basically the technical committee, as well as all the cities and everybody that's involved with the entire water that's shared for the Sonoma County Water Agency. And there's lots of cities and 3 counties that share all that. And they have really been working hard on a flood management plan, sea level rise plan, and using a huge amount of modeling effort right now to estimate what's coming down the pipeline and how to respond properly. So that is being worked on for our area and our region of the Bay entirely. So, and that it's phase 2 out of phase 4 processing, I guess, or something like that. But it's they already have a large way to go. They've been a large way, but they still have some more to do to hammer down. But they're looking at flooding, sea level rise as critical factors of this modeling of the total. So the total water picture, well, everything water in and out, watershed, fresh water, coming up, groundwater, all, it's going to be one big package of modeling that's being put together to look at so that we have sustainability for the long term, is what the goal is on that. Not only just for freshwater, but also dealing with anything water. So that's pretty good news. And of course, the other news is we have full reservoirs, which is really nice. And we have to watch out for overflow now and damage from being too high from the levels of the dikes. So something to watch out for now that they're working on. That's another set of models being used. So anyway, that's part of the water. The other meeting about water was the North Bay Watershed Association I just attended last week. And there we had someone, a grant writer, who took the whole meeting up to describe what the federal monies and state monies that might be coming available to do various things. And she was listing something on the order of $110 billion from the federal governments, and a lot for infrastructure, but there's a large section of that, something like $40 billion for water-based type of issues. And also, or was it with the state? And then the state has $8 billion, which I think has a large section of water-related issues that could be applied to. So anyway, there's going to be some monies coming down for grants, but we're going to have to act very fast. We have to have shovel-ready projects. And the larger the region, the more groups, the more partnerships, the more it deals with equity, the more chance we're going to get it, because it's extremely competitive and you have to be fast on your feet to apply to these things. So I suggested several things to that group to work on maybe as a region, because it's 3 counties, Marin, Napa, and Sonoma. And so there are some things that as a group, that could be some things that we could go after. The dredging would be one, dealing with sea level rise modeling and looking at ways all the cities can adapt to that might be another possibility. And there was even going to be some research for the federals. There even going to be some research on PFAS. Like $10 billion is going to be devoted to research and project on the PFAS chemicals right now. So it's such a hot topic. Look forward to, let's say, an extravaganza of money, but we need to be ready to go. So and I've actually said that at the council meeting, and also to Peggy, made it real clear that the staff needs to be ready to go with this stuff. Okay, so that's those 2 topics. Okay. Well, first, I apologize for being late. I forgot that it was live. I thought it was Zoom. I tried to get on, so I was at home. I said, I'm going to get on Zoom. And so we have to work on the technology, and because until the actual YouTube showed up, and I saw it was live, then I realized, it's live. And I tried to get it, but I could only view. I couldn't participate because it's a YouTube video for some reason. And anyway, and then there was a Zoom link in our that we get in our emails. And because that's why I went Zoom, because we got this email and I saw this big blue, here's the Zoom link. So I clicked on the Zoom link. Of course, nothing happened except a blank screen. So that's all right. Something's wrong here. This meeting started and I still have a blank screen. So anyway, we have to work on the technology a little bit, which is going to be difficult as we're in this transition. So that's one of the things the whole city council and all the committees have to work on together. It's going to be very, very difficult and very expensive if we go hybrid in any way. Because I just looked at the cost, I just estimating cost of hybrids, and we're looking at $30 per minute for cost of what I would estimate if you're going hybrid, given the technology and the staff that has to be involved to do. Anyway, so it's a pretty high cost. So, and that's just back of the envelope, looking at just salaries of the technical folks have to be involved to make that all happen. Okay. Then going down the line, just to let you know, I do also, besides being on city council, I'm also on the Relief and Petaluma Wetlands Alliance. And in Relief, we just finished planting over 600 trees in our city parks. And I added to that 50 more trees at Casa Grande High School just recently with another grant, working with students, which are right here with me. So that was really nice to get both those completed. So that grant is now completed, as well as the Casa Grande High School grant is now completed for what we've done. Also with the schools, I attended this meeting this afternoon of the Petaluma City Schools has a subcommittee now on climate and environmental literacy, largely focused on climate. And there's a program, we want to push that forward. And in theory, there's going to be a meeting on April 17th where the schools are, where the committee is going to try and showcase what's been going on at the schools or what is happening in the schools for environmental literacy and climate change. Hopefully that's going to happen. We still have to work on that. But the goal is to set it up so that there's a lot more literacy and classroom activity around environment and climate change next year and following years. So that's being worked on. I think you guys saw the proposal for the floating panels. I think that one came through this committee first, and anyway, that was approved. So that went through, and that's a really good thing. The second one, the EV consulting for the charging stations at $450,000 consulting fee was questioned reasonably, but Brianna came through.
460,000.
460,000.
It was originally more.
Originally more. But Rihanna came through and gave us a really good sales pitch, which convinced us to go ahead with it. Because she also said it went through this committee first, and you guys said this was a good thing to do. And so with that recommendation, I said, yeah, if this committee and Rihanna's sales pitch, so we advocated and made that happen just last Monday night. So that was a good thing. And it's going to be a lot of engineering, and I voted for it because of the amount of level of engineering that's going to be part of it, because we realize that energy in, energy out through the lines is going to be absolutely critical. We're going to be stressing the system. You start adding in that many EV stations in any one spot, it's definitely going to stress all sorts of transformers in this town, for sure. And if not, if we haven't started already with all the electric cars and being purchased and bought right now. Okay, so that was that one. That was a good thing. Hopefully you are aware that there is, at the county level, there is 2 solar panel large operations, many tens of acres of panels proposed up there by the PG&E station, including lithium storage facilities. And the community that's nearby in Adobe Creek is questioning the safety with lithium storage and how, but I have talked to both the police and fire about emergency, how to preparedness, and they're both well aware of the potential issue, and will hopefully will seek out answers should that come to be, and they will get ready and prepared, whatever it is, whatever gets decided. But it is a concern by the public, and I've done some research on it myself. I was given some information and some places to go look. And yes, lithium storage in that large of type of capacity can be a hazard, both chemically and air-wise, fire-wise, and the like, and we have to be prepared for all that. So, but there is a lithium storage that is just put on and finished, completed at the Casa Grande High School campus. So I was there watching them build it the last year. So, and it's a pretty large, huge metal box that's now in the middle of campus to give them 3-day storage of energy that they can use in case of a blackout or brownout. So it's already existing at the school already in a pretty large capacity. So anyway, we need to up that as far as understanding the engineering and safety features. So just wanted you to be aware of that as a coming topic, and to be prepared and aware of where we need it. We do need the solar panels. We do need the energy storage to make our whole EV system work coming down the line here. All right, other topics that have been brought up recently is all about the plastics in many ways and chemicals. So I've received lots of emails at the city council level. I think you probably, hopefully have seen them also. I suspect one of the public speakers today may have referred to these things, but we have both the IPM program that's being developed and discussed right now, and the use of synthetic chemicals or not versus organics and things. I'm hoping going to meet with folks tomorrow a little bit and see if I can help negotiate a little bit on that end. But the whole program of organic IPM versus general IPM and what the city does and can do. Anyway, it's a topic, and so if you guys want to weigh in on that topic of how chemicals are being used within our integrated pest management programs, it may be appropriate for this committee to weigh in on that topic if you want to look at that a future agenda. The other one is just generally in plastics overall, plastics in our whole environment and how we recycle, because recycling only apparently covers 5 to 10% total. So working with Recology to up our recycling capabilities. I've seen a couple emails come in on that, as well as the artificial turf question that's come up. And so I've done a little research on that. And I know that other municipalities and even the high school converted over from synthetic to cork, and still the landscapers I talked to are not working for them. because there's drainage issues and the like over there at the Casa Grande campus, and still some gopher issues and the like keep popping up, as well as the other things that may have been brought forward. So something that, again, this, if you want to deal with plastics, chemicals, carcinogens, IPM, synthetics, that whole area of chemistry from our whole society. And then you can always expand on there to household chemicals and the like, household air and the like. That's why we want to get away from gas in the household and the like. So that's all one big package. If you guys, as a climate action, want to have that as part of yours, anyway, just thought I'd toss that at you as an opportunity to think about. Okay, that covers those two. And the other thing is I went to I was sent a series of podcasts that are all about the dealing with collapse and the whole world societal collapse. And it was a really interesting podcast, but in listening to it and listening to what's happening in the climate change modeling, because it's based on the MIT models for the future. And so there is more folks and more scientists talking about that our time frame is accelerating faster and faster than anybody thinks. And actually, there are some reports out there that is building up. So just be aware that, anyway, that was another information that was sent to the city council as to go look at this podcast and start listening. And it's over 100 podcasts in it. I've listened to 8 now, just this afternoon, just to catch up what it was all about. But it is concerning that they are quoting several of the models and research papers that are suggesting in recent times that, yeah, the scientists are going, we have a shorter period of time than we thought. So anyway, need to accelerate our efforts is what the bottom line is there. So I'm all for doing everything we can do with this committee. Next Monday, there's going to be a goal-setting meeting. I didn't realize it until, I guess, yesterday, and I saw the agenda, but we have a meeting Monday to review all of the 10 major goals for the city coming up. And so that is an opportunity if any of you want to help check in and say, hey, of the 10 goals, prioritizing, because I think maybe one of the hints I saw in the staff report, we were talking about maybe staff is pretty overloaded in everything that they're doing, and do we need to prioritize which goals should be done for, of even the 10, which ones should be done first. So if there's goals that the Climate Action Committee really wants to make sure gets to rise to the top 5, Monday's the time to give us that input. And on the general plan, yeah, we just talked about that already. So yeah, so you guys are good to go. I think keep working really hard, get as much detail as you can to support the general plan and what's happening on the city website. Make sure your information gets in where it needs to go. So that's my report.
Thank you, John.
Long-winded, I'm sorry.
It's all right. Other commissioner comments?
I'll throw in a few. Just sketchy. It's not going to be detailed like Councilmember Shribs. So we've tried to pull together, you're working with Ann here, the next Ann over Ann Baker, tried to pull together a comprehensive picture of our emissions on a spreadsheet kind of thing. So we did do that through 2040. And including, as we talked about before, the fugitive methane emissions. So we're trying to be complete associated with natural gas, as New York State is doing. So we pulled it together, but we're not able yet to put in reductions from electrification efforts and other things, and sequestration. So we just took a picture of where we are now, so we have some idea of the situation. And what we're seeing is that the unit emissions per person in Petaluma was about 20 metric tons per person. And that turns out, you mentioned MIT. MIT did a study in 2007, and they got that same number for the average U.S. Per capita emissions. Of course, that includes all our consumption emissions too, because that's our total effect on the planet. And so anyway, we're looking at that, and then that tells us, boy, the sequestration, no matter how much electrification we do, there's still all the consumption to address, which is not that easy and not going to be done fast, because we've got this culture of enormous consumption, and And it's driven by again, the cultural push for exponential economic growth continuously. So somehow behind all that, over the years, we're going to have to switch our emphasis to growing other things, like switching to regenerative businesses, putting the growth effort there, not in, so we start restoring the earth instead of taking it apart. So anyway, we've looked at some sequestration, just kind of looking around. We know about the trees, the carbon farming, and one mechanical thing we found that's coming along, I may have mentioned it before, but we don't get together much, is the synthetic limestone that Blue Planet is making in Pittsburgh, California. So what they're doing is sequestering CO2 in rock, so it's a permanent sequestration system, and the rock would be 44% sequestered CO2 by weight. So if you put that aggregate into a concrete mix, all of a sudden the concrete becomes a net negative situation, minus 500 pounds per cubic yard, for example. So that can add up, and if through the county we starting with some pilot projects here, demo projects in Petaluma, and then a Public Works can start specifying that kind of thing. I don't know the price of this stuff yet, but at any rate, it sounds like it's really worth looking into. This is one sequestration effort that has the potential to save at least 25 gigatons of CO2 per year on a global basis. But if we can start kickstarting it, that would be wonderful. The plastics, there's so much about plastics, and I just heard I was on a webinar with Vandava Shiva. She's this amazing physicist in India who's really interested in the health of the people and the soil and the seeds and all that stuff. So these horrible pollutants that get out there are they do so much damage. So we're all about trying to create a healthy earth, and everything is, so we've got to switch that around. So I appreciate what Councilmember Shribs was talking about, and Taryn Obaid earlier. Those ball fields could be wonderful sequestration sites, just with increasing the carbon content in the soils, while at the same time avoiding the damage from the plastics as they break down in there, and keeping the athletes cooler, because water vapor is it's a very important, it's the most abundant of the greenhouse gases, actually, and it has a very high heat content, or ability to carry heat or cool. The thermodynamic properties of that are so helpful. So, and we've got recycled water to irrigate those fields. So when they're irrigated, they're going to be emitting coolth during the day, and the athletes will be comfortable. Okay. So the other thing about consumption emissions, Ann and I looked at it, we graphed them out. This is just based on the work that coolclimate.org did in 2015. And our food consumptions that's where the largest impact is out of those. So one thing we want to look at is, can we demonstrate how to, there's so many ways we can get at it, but we have very experienced, one very experienced person on grocery store refrigeration in town. So we're looking at doing a demonstration of how to change the refrigerants in a grocery store so they become safe, like to CO2 from these HFC things. Because half the emissions from grocery stores are from leaking refrigerants generally. So we can just get rid of that. Another thing we looked at on the consumption side, it has to do with managing solid waste. And one idea we're looking at and trying to investigate and flesh out would be sequestering or separating all the organic waste and converting that into both compost, but done through anaerobic digestion, so we manage the emissions, and eventually green hydrogen. And once we get a good market for the green hydrogen, then we could do the next step of adding a regenerative step of seeing if we can recreate the coastal kelp forests. And with excess kelp, that's another potential source of green hydrogen once we've got the system going, and we could run the train on it. So just examples of things we might be able to put out there to keep the imagination coming that we can actually solve this problem. So there's a bunch of other things, but that's probably enough for tonight. And I'll shut up now.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ned. Other commissioner comments? All right, so we move on to staff comments.
Okay.
Warp speed?
Pardon, what, warp speed. I was overzealous in my comments tonight, but they're going to be posted afterwards, so I will streamline them and then you can go back to them. Goals and priorities, next Monday, 6 o'clock. I'm going through city council agenda updates to begin with.
And feel free to skip over things that have been mentioned by others.
Yeah, there's a presentation by Sonoma Water on March 20th. The resolutions for a couple of projects coming up also on March 20th. March 20th is going to be a big, big day. Our planning department is purchasing a electric vehicle that will be going to council on March 20th for approval. I'm going to skip through. I have more city council comments, but again, they'll be posted once Shelley gets back from her vacation. Department updates, the active transportation plan. The consultant is finalizing a draft project list and map, which will be shared with the general public in winter of 2023 through community workshops and an interactive online mapping tool. The draft plan is expected to go to city committees and commissions for their review in spring of 2023, followed by the council's review and adoption in summer of 2023. Petaluma's planning department is now accepting permits that utilize emerging technology such as solar roof shingles. By quickly responding to the rapidly evolving market of building electrification, the city is committed to streamline and increase the adoption of residential solar use. More information can be found on the building's website. Going to skip some of these department updates. Again, they can be found later. Floating solar, the only remaining on-site survey work to be completed is the geotech soil drilling, and 30% designs are estimated for city staff review in April of 2023. The Sizerco contract, Sizerco has completed their walkthrough of all city facilities and are compiling the information for consideration of next steps in project's development. I will talk with the project manager about getting that on our agenda in the near future. The Wildan project, Wildan participated in some of the same walkthroughs with Sizerco, and have identified 16 locations where the program could replace water heaters in city facilities. And a shout out to David for bringing that program to my attention. There are some concerns about the additional electrical load in some of these buildings just because of aging facilities. So we are meeting with the project leaders of Wildan, and we're trying to determine next steps. And potentially some of the information we're going to be getting from the EV charging infrastructure master plan will help inform that project as we look at electrical loads at facilities. There will be a public budget meeting, which is tentatively set for May 8th, and that will have a start time of 6 p.m. I'm assuming it'll be in this room. Cool Petaluma did not have any current updates. The CAP update, as of yesterday, all Ramey working groups met with the Climate Action Commission ad hocs, and this phase of that work has been completed. City leadership will be meeting tomorrow to discuss plans. We will likely have to conduct a second meeting with staff to discuss prioritization and next steps, as the first meeting will be primarily to review the action plans. and to discuss Climate Action Commission feedback. Once these meetings have concluded, we will circle back around with you all regarding next steps. My personal updates, the EV charging infrastructure master plan was passed by council 6-1. There was some concern about the high cost, and I pointed out the multiple benefits that we're going to be getting from that plan, which includes the energy grid analysis. The citywide electrification plan, I'm currently working with city staff on that. There are some, what we consider to be low-hanging fruit that we are targeting. I'm working on an electrification informational banner on the permit website to inform people of the benefits of electrification and why it will help with our climate goals. We are incorporating a checkbox into that permitting process so that we can start tracking when electrical permits are pulled, so that we can start collecting that data, and I'm hoping to get historical data going back several years as well. Working on an electrification expo. This was originally going to be part of an Earth Day event partnership with Cool Petaluma. However, there was some concern from Cool Petaluma about participation from vendors due to the Butter and Eggs event being so closely after that. So we are revisiting or exploring another option for late spring instead. This expo may be a good opportunity to incorporate a similar permit fee reduction program, similar to the one that you brought to my attention through St. Helena. So I'm reviewing that program to see if we can incorporate it into electrification expo. I'm working with the Design Guild to implement an electrification hub on the Climate Ready webpage, and I'm using Denver's electrification hub as an example. It's really interactive, and I really am inspired by the website that they've put together. I'm still waiting to hear back about the bus shelter artwork. It's taking longer to print than initially anticipated. That should be completed next week, and installation will begin, and I'll update the community once installation has begun. All of the necessary documentation has been delivered to the county for the joint fueling services contract. Our legal teams on both sides worked together to create an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding Agreement, for this process that we may be able to use as a template for future partnerships. Ultimately, with this RFP, it was a partnership between the county, Santa Rosa, and Petaluma. Roanoke Park was originally going to be a part of that, but they found that they were able to do renewable diesel through their current contract. But as they were exiting the agreement, Santa Rosa was stepping in. So we're hoping to get some bulk pricing on that. I met with regional partners to participate in a demo for a carbon tracking platform called N0. We'll be meeting again in a few weeks to discuss thoughts and concerns about the program. Likely any type of contract for a regional tracking system would have to be managed through RCPA as the lead agency, and then each jurisdiction would be responsible for their own scope. I am going to have to get feedback from the other jurisdictions that participated in that demo. Petaluma is in the process of determining the feasibility of purchasing several e-bikes to add to our e-fleet. Climate Ready, myself, I'm working with Bjorn and Ken Eichstad to see if we can get that funded. Staff would be encouraged to utilize these bikes to travel between facilities. This project would be in partnership with Yuba Bikes. We currently have the budget to purchase 2, but we would like to purchase 10. So I'm going to see if Climate Ready can fund the remaining 8 that's necessary. Excited to announce that there's been sustainability language included in 2 of our current open bids for Petaluma. It is the Caulfield Bridge and Extension Project and the Kennyworth Park Revitalization Project. And the one that I'm specifically most happy to announce was the Caulfield Project, the RFP. I went in and was very liberal with the language and specified that the consultant will prioritize the use of sustainable materials and practices in design development, and that materials that meet project needs with the lowest amount of embodied carbon will be prioritized when selecting construction materials. And I put that in the RFP. Not sure how it would be received, but it was received well and is in the final document that's on Petaluma's webpage. So it's the first step in getting embodied carbon language into our RFPs. Upcoming agenda items, PCAC, for April, PCAC will give a brief summary of the completion of their program. They have a presentation happening next Tuesday on the 14th, and so they will come back to the appropriate commissions to give a summary of that presentation. The EV charging infrastructure master plan contract is currently being routed for signatures, and once that's complete, that scope will be coming to the commission in April. It'll also be shared with the transportation ad hoc for review, and once the kickoff meeting has been scheduled, I'm going to work with consultants to get a draft of their findings to the commission prior to being finalized. And then also for April, we're looking to have the Sustainable Design Assistance Team, Assessment Team, join us with a presentation. I took notes from commissioner comments about future potential topics, and Ann and I meet next week and we can discuss those further. That was a mouthful, and I'm done.
Excellent. Thanks for all the good news, Rihanna. And I think we're adjourned. Everybody enjoy your evening.
Have a good evening, everyone.